Good evening. My name is Angela Barrios. I'm the superintendent of the Pennridge School District, and I welcome you to this evening's program. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this important event, Transforming Stigma, Building Mental Health for Life. As a district, we understand that mental health awareness is not just an issue, it's a critical priority for the well-being of our students, families, and community. This evening's event reflects our collective commitment to creating a supportive environment where mental health is openly discussed, and more importantly, where stigma is replaced with understanding and compassion. We are incredibly fortunate to have the support of our community partners, and together we can begin the important conversations that will build mental health for life. Pennridge partnered with several organizations to plan this event. I want to recognize the individuals who represent the health and human services organizations within our county. And again, we're part of the planning team along with our Director of Student Services, Mr. Ernest Johnson, to my left or behind me. Our school district social workers, Ms. Dawn Hoops, Ms. Alicia Landgraf, and Mr. Joe Werner. Nick Amy, Associate Executive Director of NAMI Bucks County. Katie Marsiglia, Human Services Hub Coordinator, Bucks County Division of Human Services. Keely Rosenthal, Emergency and Court Services Coordinator, QPR Coordinator for Bucks County. And Ryan Schweiger, Community Outreach, Behavioral Health Community Liaison Specialist, St. Luke's Penn Foundation. You will hear from these professionals as each are part of our panel for this evening's program. Our team at Pennridge is dedicated to ensuring our schools provide a safe space where students' emotional needs are met alongside their academic growth. Tonight you will hear from experts, connect with local resources, and engage in meaningful discussions to help us all better support one another. So without further ado, I wanted to just share a personal anecdote. So I had an uncle who's since passed away, but my father's eldest brother was served in the Vietnam War in the Marine Corps. And when I was a young kid, my grandparents lived in Puerto Rico. I came across a stack of letters that were, and I read through them, and I looked at old photo albums of pictures of him. And I remember reading some of the letters he sent to my father, and my grandmother still had them, and talked about some of the things that were happening. And when he returned to the United States, he was completely maladjusted. And my grandfather never understood it. My grandfather was from Puerto Rico and just didn't understand, not because he was from Puerto Rico, but just he was a Spaniard or tough, and just called my uncle crazy and just could never get it together because my uncle couldn't maintain the job, and again was just maladjusted, drug addicted, and eventually ended up in jail and died way too young. Whereas the other sons who didn't serve in that combat zone seemed okay. So, I think of that personal stigma that afflicted one of my family members, and anyway. Our keynote speaker, John Fry, is a 1992 Pennridge graduate, and he is currently St. Luke's clinical lead for therapeutic services. Jason. Yeah, I was saying my mind, I'm sorry. Jason's keynote will focus on stigma related to mental health and the importance of wellness and recognizing the purpose and function of treatment. Thank you again for being here tonight and part of this important dialogue. I hope we can transform stigma into support and build a healthier, compassionate Pennridge community. Without further ado, I'd like to ask Mr. Ernest Johnson to please come to the lectern to make a few remarks.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Barrios, for your opening remarks. I echo Mr. Barrios' sentiments when he called attention to mental health awareness and treatment as a critical priority for Pennridge School District. Programs of this nature are designed to build capacity within our community and to facilitate an understanding about the harm caused by stigmatizing mental health. Mr. Jason Fry, our keynote speaker, and our panel members will provide you with their insights into the challenges children and adolescents confront because of adverse childhood experiences and ecological factors. We are fortunate to have a panel who can speak from both personal experiences and their professional work in the field. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Fry, holds master's degrees in social work and public administration, both from Kutztown University, and he is a licensed clinical social worker. He has worked in the mental health field for 25 years. He is nationally certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy and is a certified, don't ask me what this is, but it sounds good, geek therapist. Mr. Fry has presented at conferences on topics such as human trafficking, motivational interviewing, clinical assessments in residential programs, and using genogram software for practice and research. Mr. Fry has also published articles on motivational interviewing, stages of change, and narrative therapy. In his spare time, he writes speculative fiction and trains as a strongman. Before I turn the program over to Mr. Fry, I want to thank our exceptional school district social workers and our partner organizations for their time and collaboration to bring this event to Pennridge. I also want to recognize the fact that programs of this type sometimes elicit strong emotions for many different reasons. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in a place where you need to speak to someone, we have professional counselors in the conference room outside of the LGI. Most of you probably don't know where that is. Go out here, make a left, and look for some glass on your right. We asked you to submit questions in advance of the event, and that was intentional, so that our panelists could provide you with well-thought-out responses. We still will have an interactive session where our social workers will walk around with microphones, and you can ask questions on the spot here this evening. One area that I want to address relates to bullying. The topic was submitted multiple times, and it is important for you to know that the district has a bullying, cyberbullying policy. It is policy 249, and it can be found on the school board tab of the district website. All of our schools follow policy 249, and our staff understand the need to report bullying to school administration if observed. As parents, you and your child can also report bullying to principals or another adult so they can be investigated and resolved appropriately for both the complainant and the respondent. Our schools should be safe, orderly, and positive learning environments for everyone. One other note before I turn it over. After the panelists finish or conclude their part, the resource tables remain outside, and you can continue to speak to those individuals represented by the organizations. So without further ado, Mr. Fry.
Good evening, Pennridge. I have to be honest, I'm a little nervous being here tonight. A lot of my formative years were spent here in the Pennridge district, K through 12. So I am a second generation alumni, 1992, go Rams. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about reducing the stigma of mental health. So first, I'm going to try and make this as brief as possible, although a lot of people say I'm pretty long-winded, so we'll see what happens. But what is stigma? So stigma is when you're viewed negatively due to a distinguishing characteristic or a personal trait. So these traits that people have are either thought to be or actually are a disadvantage, which is considered a negative stereotype. A lot of these negative attitudes and stereotypes of people with a mental illness are common, and we all have these thoughts that pop into our head about what we see as mental health, and there's reasons for that. Some of the causes of that stigma are a lack of understanding of mental illness and fear of mental illness. And unfortunately, especially today with social media and news reporting and everything, we get a lot of inaccurate or misleading media representation about both of these features. The reality of mental illness is that it's real, it's out there, and a lot of the times you don't even notice it. But media representation kind of glorifies the ugly part of mental illness. So we look at some of the myths and then the truths about mental illness. One of the myths is that anybody who has mental illness is violent, and that's 100% wrong. Research actually indicates that using drugs and or alcohol is a more reliable predictor of violent behavior than mental illness. Unfortunately, what we see a lot is that people use some negative coping skills of drugs and alcohol when they have mental illness, just because they may not have the resources available to them. We also hear a lot that mental illness is not curable, that you're going to have it for the rest of your life. And while that can be partially true, as many as 80% of people with a mental illness will return to a normal, productive life. And again, like I said, there's people around you that have mental illness that you're never even going to notice. A lot of it, fortunately, is caught when they're younger and they get the treatment that they need. We also hear a lot that mental illness is contagious, which again, 100% incorrect. Mental health is not a disease that you can catch like a bacterial or a viral infection. It's not like the flu. It's not like COVID. It is just something that some people are born with or come about from experiences. And then the last myth is that mental illness is a product of poor parenting. I know we like to say that your child is like that because of the way that you parent them, which again, 100% false. There's a variety of reasons, both inherited and environmental factors, that lead to mental illness. The factors that lead to the mental illness can actually be affected by the parent, both in good and negative ways. So parenting a poor parent is not necessarily going to be the cause of mental illness. There's a lot of effects that the stigma and the discrimination will cause to people, such as reduced hope, lower self-esteem, or a complete loss of self-esteem. Increased psychiatric symptoms, especially when we're talking about depression and anxiety. You're going to see a lot of heightened awareness about things. Difficulties with social relationships. When you're dealing with mental illness and you're struggling on a daily basis, your thoughts don't go out to the people around you. You're thinking about how can I survive in this moment, not who can I go to or how can I have this conversation, or even how can I learn about what they're teaching in school today. There's a reduced likelihood of staying in treatment, again, because of the stigma. Somebody who is stigmatized and is discriminated against are going to think that treatment itself is part of that stigma. Everybody's going to know I have a therapist. They're going to know I'm crazy. And then, of course, more difficulties at work, more difficulties at school, more difficulties in social situations, more difficulties in the community in general. Some statistics, and this is 2023 Access to Care data from Mental Health America. 10.8%. That's 5.5 million people of US adults with a mental illness have no insurance whatsoever. 54.7% of US adults with a mental illness receive no treatment. That's half of people with a mental illness in the United States receive no treatment. In Pennsylvania, that number is a little bit lower at 51.7, but that's still just over half. 28.2%, so over a quarter percentage of US adults with mental illness reported that they're not able to receive treatment due to cost. So what people think is, oh, if I have insurance, it'll pay for all of it, but it doesn't. A lot of the times there's co-pays, and those co-pays could be as much as $80 to $100 per visit. If you're meeting with your therapist, chances are you're meeting on a weekly basis. So that's $80 to $100 every week that you see a therapist. 59.8%, so almost 60% of US youth with major depression receive no mental health treatment. A lot of that, there's a lot of factors involved with that, whether it's part of the motivation, again, stigma. If I'm a youth, anyone under 18, there's a stigma about seeing a therapist. And again, a lot of our youth are uninsured, like we showed above. However, with all of that said, the uninsured, not going to therapy, not being able to afford therapy, Pennsylvania is the 6th highest ranked state with access to mental health care. 6th highest ranked state. So if this is what's happening in Pennsylvania, can you imagine what's happening around the rest of the United States? A little bit of depression, anxiety, behavior disorders. This is for youth under the ages of 18. You can see our 12 to 17 years olds are struggling every day with depression and anxiety. And this is the percentage of our students that we're seeing. So 12 to 17-year-olds with depression is at 6%. Anxiety is over 10%. And then you have your behavior disorders, that conduct disorder, oppositional defiant, some of those things. That's more of our 6 to 11-year-olds. That's elementary school age. And that's 9%. These are some very scary and sobering statistics to see about our youth in the United States today. So what can we do about it? Reducing the stigma comes down to 2 major factors. Number 1, public health interventions. In order to have a successful public health intervention, you have to include that contact, whether it's in person or if it's done right, you can do virtual. Since the advent of COVID, just 4 years ago, we've been seeing a huge increase in virtual therapy, and it's getting better all the time. I know myself, I provide therapy for middle school students, and we provide this therapy year-round. The program that we started in some of our schools, I was our first therapist. We literally started the program 3 days before COVID shut down the school systems. 3 days before. So for 6 months, almost every kid that I saw was virtual. So we got on-the-ground training real quick on how to do this. But still, in-person training, in-person contact is going to be the best. You need to focus on a range of disorders. I showed you depression, and I showed you anxiety and behavior disorders. There is so much more. You have intellectual and developmental disabilities, things like autism. You have that oppositional defiance disorder, and we didn't even touch ADHD, which is one of the highest ranked mental disorders that students have. A successful public health intervention has to involve participation of people with lived experiences, peers, the people who know exactly what you're going through and can sit there and talk to you because they've lived it. You have to target the groups to have the most interaction. So if you're running a program in a school, which would be great, you'd be able to target all of your school-age children. If you're running a program out in the community, you have to make sure that that's going to be targeted towards the people that are going to be able to use it. One of the biggest things that I hear all the time is, I just don't have transportation, I have no access to get somewhere. So you have to be able to target this towards people that can interact with it. The services need to be tailored to specific language and cultures of the community. So much of our literature is just in English, but this country is a huge melting pot now. So you have to make sure that you're taking other people's languages and cultures into consideration when you're building a successful program. And of course, services should last several years in order to be effective. There are programs that can meet with people for a short amount of time, even as little as 6 to 10 weeks, but you still have to give them something afterwards. There has to be support that's going to last with them forever. The second part of reducing stigma has to do with our individual actions. We need to talk openly about mental health, which is why we're here today. And that includes sharing on social media. I see some of the celebrities that I follow on things like TikTok and Instagram. They're putting out 988 suicide hotline every single week. And every single week, it's touching newer and newer people. You need to educate yourself and others. One of the things I said that contributes to the stigma is just the lack of knowledge that we have about mental health. Be conscious of language being used. People aren't crazy. People aren't schizophrenics. We need to be careful about the language that we're using and correcting people that are using the wrong language. We need to encourage equality between your physical health and your mental health. There is so much research that has been done on the effects of your mental health on your physical health and your physical health on your mental health. I was at a symposium not that long ago about student athletes who have had serious injuries that have kept them from being athletes. So a serious physical injury like that does so much damage to your identity if you're a student, if you're an athlete. Think about like your star quarterback on a football team who suddenly has an injury that they're never going to be able to play football again. You just took away their entire identity. Of course that's going to lead to some mental health issues. We have to show compassion to people. We should be doing that anyway, but especially for our vulnerable populations, people with mental illness, especially our children with mental illness. Be honest about treatment, normalize it. Again, I work in a school, so my kids, when they know it's time for their therapy, they will raise their hand and tell their teachers, hey, it's time for me to go to therapy. And none of the other kids are laughing at them, because, well, most of the other kids are also in therapy too. Let the media know when they're using stigmatizing language. This goes back to that A, talk openly about it. It goes back to educating yourself and others. When the media is using language that is not right, make sure they know it. Whether you're calling them directly, you're pointing it out to them on social media, wherever you need to do it. Make sure that the media knows, because again, that's one of the biggest influences for stigma. And then choose empowerment over shame. Mental illness is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that you can grow from. It's something that you can get strength from. It's something that you can show to other people to help them when they're struggling as well. So some of the community programs that St. Luke's has right here in this community. We have our Assertive Community Treatment Team, our ACT team. They care for adults 18 years of age and older to eliminate symptoms of mental illness. So they're looking to minimize the effects of mental illness already. And of course, they're looking to enhance somebody's ability to live independently. Because like I said before, people with mental health can live independently. They're not going to be stuck somewhere doing nothing for the rest of their lives. We have our Camp Crossroads, free weekend camp for youth living with addiction in their family. Day Spring, which is faith-based counseling services. Again, you're looking at people's heritage, their culture. Early intervention services. These are for children under the age of 3. Mental health can affect people under the age of 3. So just think about that. Under the age of 3, mental health can already start grabbing a hold of people. We have emergency services, which is trained crisis. We have our family-based services. Family-based is great. This is one of the things that I recommend all the time because the child, when they come home from school, they're coming right back into their family environment. It's great to have somebody come in and say, hey, why don't we try this? We're in your community. We're in your home. Let's see what we can do here. Health Connections, which is a neat program that's aimed at integrating mental health care within the physical health care facilities. Our Innovations Adolescent Acute Partial Program. This is in Allentown at our Sacred Heart facility. This is group and individual therapy for our kids that are ages 14 to 17. It's not necessarily a day program, but they go there for several hours a day to learn new skills. Our Intellectual Disability Supports Coordination, which looks at residents ages 3 and older with an IQ of 70 or less prior to the age of 22. Mental Health Case Management. For anybody who's had to do paperwork surrounding mental health, you know it's like that thick. It's like picking up a phone book. We have case managers that can help with all of that paperwork and get you access to resources that you may not even know exist. We have our mental health outpatient services. That's what I work with. Our outpatient services is what you consider traditional therapy, where you go and you see a therapist on your time. We have residential services. That's our Penn Villa, again at our Penn Foundation campus. This is housing support for adults 18 and older with major mental illness and co-occurring mental illness and substance use disorders. We have our peer supports. These are, again, people with lived experience that are helping you through all of the crises that you're having. They will talk to you about all kinds of behavioral health services. Penn Gardens. It's a HUD subsidized complex of 20 single occupancy apartments for individuals with low income and a psychiatric disability, a mental disorder. IPR, this is mental illness and co-occurring substance use disorders. It's somebody who comes out and helps you set and realize your goals. We have our recovery center, again, part of substance use, and our recovery center encompasses all parts of substance use. There's a detox facility, there's inpatient rehabilitation, there's outpatient, intensive outpatient, you name it, they got it. Village of Hope, this is a housing program for homeless adults, and then our Wellspring clubhouses, which provide social, educational, vocational skills and opportunities for adults. So these are just some of the things in your community just through St. Luke's Penn Foundation. So if we have all of this, you can imagine all of the other community resources that are available to you. And then I just want to end with a couple national support numbers, because mental illness isn't just here, it's everywhere. So there are a lot of national support crisis numbers that are set up to help no matter what your mental disorder is, whatever your crisis is, anything that you're having difficulties with. These are some numbers that can help with that. Thank you all very much. I hope I was quick enough. I got a thumbs up, so I did good. I did want to introduce Tom Roskowski at the end there. Tom is one of the chairs of the Bucks County Suicide Prevention Task Force. So, there you go. Thank you all again.
Thank you, everybody. I'll make it relatively quick so we can have this lovely panel start talking. I want to introduce myself. I'm Tom Roskowski. I work for Bucks County's Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Programs. See that yet? I hold a unique role with the county, and I always kind of like to say that when I'm speaking is I get to work with a lot of great initiatives and things that we are doing to help kind of support our communities. So one of the roles that I get to fill is I get to be a chair for our Bucks County Suicide Prevention Task Force. And we do a lot of things to help within our community, from education, advocacy work, to help stop that stigma, and prevention, intervention, and post-vention efforts. So I just want to say that if you want to be involved with a lot of our supports, with a lot of our efforts to help fight that stigma, help improve our mental health services, we're available out there in the lobby to come talk to. I do also want to say, we mentioned that there will be counselors here tonight. I'm going to be posted up right behind those seats there, so sometimes this can be a difficult topic, talking about mental health or talking about suicide. If you do feel the need to step out, please come find me there in the back. I'm willing to take you out, help you get down to the counselors if need be, or just somebody else to talk to. So I want to kind of introduce the panel. I'm going to start it off by passing it over to Ryan Schwaber. Ryan is a certified peer specialist, certified recovery specialist, and has been with St. Luke's Penn Foundation for 10 years now. So Ryan, thanks for being here.
All right. Hey everyone, my name is Brian Schwager, and I work for St. Luke's Penn Foundation, like Tom just said, and in community outreach. I'm going to do something kind of weird real quick, and I think it's weird, but it's cool. It's a good weird. So, all right, if you feel comfortable with this, the person who's next to you, or behind you, or in front of you, just try to embrace that person. Give them a hug or a handshake real quick, and embrace one another. Bring it in. I feel the love. I feel the love. It's really important, you know, human connection, embracing one another, hugging one another, letting people know that they're seen and that they're heard. It's so important. And so thank you all for participating in that. And it just helps me remember, because you know, there are so many times where I've lost people in my life due to overdose or suicide, where I didn't have that last chance to give them a hug or a handshake or tell them that I love them. And I think that's so important, that we remember that, right? And know that, you know, every moment in our lives are very precious, and not to be taken for granted. So, real quick, another thing. So who in here, again, show of hands, and it's okay, you know, it's okay if not, but who in here maybe has in their life at some point experienced some type of mental health challenge? Keep your hands up too. Who in here at some point in their life has a family member that has faced some type of mental health challenge before? Someone that you love maybe? A friend has had a mental health challenge? What about substance use? Somebody, a family member that has experienced substance use disorder, or maybe passed away from a tragic overdose or an accidental overdose, okay? So we're all in this together, right? You can put your hands down. I appreciate you keeping yours up though. This is something that we need to continue to normalize, and I feel like I've worked in this field now for over 13 years. I've worked for Penn Foundation for 11, serving this community here. I've had the honor to do that. I don't live in this community, I live in another community, but it's been a pleasure being a part of this community. And I feel like in those 13 years that I've worked in this field, I've seen a shift even in 13 years from when I first started working in here in this field with you know, stigma being reduced and people coming around and sharing their experience and being and not being ashamed of it, right? Because shame and silence equals death, right? And we need to be open about these things. So I appreciate you all entertaining those little activities there, but I also just want to quick share that I am the most important thing. Like, I do work at Penn Foundation, I do community outreach and education. The Pennridge School, this will be the 3rd year that I have the opportunity to come in here and engage with all the 9th grade students around substance use prevention and recovery education. And it's been just an amazing opportunity with the Pennridge community to do that, and I think it's so important. And working on prevention efforts in this community. But the most important role that I have is that I am a person who is in long-term recovery from mental health and a substance use disorder. And for what that means for me is I haven't used drugs since September 5th of 2008, and since then, my life has continually changed for the better, right? And led me into wanting to engage with young people around prevention and engaging with them around preventative factors in their community and supporting their mental health. So I think that's the most important thing for me, is that I have lived experience, and there's other panel members that do as well, but I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted and shared that with you all. And you know, I grew up in a very supportive household, right? 2 loving, caring parents, a younger sister I never needed for anything growing up. It was all there for me, right? But I struggled with some stuff, right? I just never could really figure out why I felt the way that I felt, right? I could never really pinpoint it, right? And when I was a young person, I was diagnosed with mental illness. And I remember my parents taking me to see a psychiatrist and taking me to see a therapist, and it was kind of hard talking about what was going on and doing like role playing and, you know, then being prescribed medications, and like I didn't like taking them, and I struggled, right? And I didn't talk about it with anybody at school or outside of school for that matter. I didn't even want to talk about it in my own household, right? With the people that knew I was going. I didn't like going and talking about it in therapy or with the psychiatrist, right? And when I was 13 years old is when I was first introduced to illicit drugs, to substances, right? And I remember the first time that I experimented with a substance, and that was with marijuana, right? And this is just my story, right? But I experimented with marijuana, and I remember for the first time in my life feeling like, wow, I don't have to be Ryan, right? In this moment, and the problem with that is that I know today, in hindsight, that was just a Band-Aid that I was putting over, right? A much larger wound of my mental health challenges that I wasn't really addressing, but I felt like I could address at the time with substances, right? And marijuana led into alcohol, and alcohol led into prescription pills that were not prescribed to me, and prescription pills that weren't prescribed to me led into other illicit drugs, right? And I struggled, right? I struggled all through school, through middle school, through high school, being arrested, DUIs, substance use, trauma, you name it, right? In and out of different treatment and medications and therapists, and you know, I really struggled, guys. And like I said, I finally found what I call sustained recovery when I was 25 years old. And you know, it's been over 16 years now that I've found this path to wellness, and it's all through community, it's all through connection, right? And getting the treatment that I so desperately deserved and need, and people asking me what Ryan thinks could work for him, and not telling me what I needed to do and how I needed to do it, and right? Like people giving me the opportunity to have a self-directed journey, right? And giving me the tools and resources, and with an open mind and an open heart, right? And so that's a little bit about my journey that has brought me into this work and this field, and having a passion for helping others and connecting with others. And like Jason said, there's so many resources out here in the community, right? There's so many, we need to come at it from all different angles and approaches, right? And plant these seeds that may grow into the fruits of wellness for young people, for adults. You know, the Surgeon General put out a word that parental stress is a national issue here, right? And it truly is, and we got to remember that, right? Like, I'm a parent too. I have an 11-year-old son, right, who's in middle school, and he's struggling, right? And he didn't struggle in elementary school, but all of a sudden he's struggling emotionally, right? Not academically, but emotionally in middle school. And so I'm just so grateful that he has parents at home that are able to support him through it. But the reality is parents are facing a lot of stress, right? And it is a crisis. And parents need to take care of themselves too, right? So this is about young people, but it's also about us. It's also about the parental figures and the parental figures taking care of themselves, whether it's around substance use or whether it's around their mental health and well-being, right? So there's so many resources out there, and I'll talk more about that later, but I'm going to wind down here. And again, I just want to say I appreciate you all. And again, it's my honor and pleasure to be here and be a part of this panel. And if there, you know, as we continue to engage in this panel, hopefully I'll get time to say a couple more words. I won't be as long-winded, I promise. And I just respect you all and think it's amazing that you all are here tonight to be a part of this conversation. So, thank you.
Joe Warner, the social worker here at the high school. I have the privilege to introduce our next panel member. Just real quick, I want to thank all of the community agencies that came out there. I didn't get to go around to each of you, but thank you so much for being here and everybody else that's here tonight. So the next panelist is Katie Marseglia. I have the privilege of introducing her because we've known each other for quite a long time, close to probably 20 years, and you might say, Joe, how do you know a young lady like that for 20 years? Well, I was her social worker when she was in school, so at Shannon School District. From there, Katie has gone on to do amazing things, graduated from Temple and Fordham Social Work School. She is in charge of the county hub, which is an all-encompassing resource center. Basically, you have a question about human services, we go to Katie and she finds an answer for us. And not only does she find an answer, but she's quick. It's amazing how fast she is with finding out something. And if she doesn't know it, she's like, I'll find it. So she's great. So I have the privilege again to knowing Katie over these years, and I'm so glad that she's part of our panel tonight. So thank you for being here, Katie.
Thank you, Joe. I think I met Joe. It has been almost 20 years. I don't think 20 years exactly, but so I am Katie Marseglia. I'm a social worker, and Joe mentioned what I do. I run the hub. I'm also a suicide loss and a suicide attempt survivor. So I asked Joe to introduce me just because I've known Joe for so long now, and he was my school social worker, and now we're colleagues, which is really cool. When I was in 9th grade, age 14, my only sibling died by suicide. She was 16. By 14, I already struggled with depression. I was already seeing therapists, maybe being dragged a little bit. I was lucky enough to have a mother who was a clinical social worker, so she knew all the right things, did all the right things. My sister died pretty traumatically, and it was hard because, we don't talk about mental health now like we do back 20 years ago. We don't have programming in schools or things like this. So I really struggled after that, and I was assigned a school social worker, Joe Warner. There was a team approach. I believe there was a couple social workers involved, and they really saved me and helped me make it through high school and college. But during that time, I struggled, and I mostly struggled in silence, despite, again, growing up in a great household and having somebody who's in the field. I struggled silently because of the stigma, because I didn't want to be judged or looked at as crazy or lose friends because, I was going to therapy or I was taking medication, whatever the case may be. So I continued to struggle, and I always thought, like, one day I'll be cured. One day I'm going to find the thing that works, and I'm not going to be depressed. I'm not going to be anxious. I'm not going to want to die by suicide. I was very suicidal for many years, and I held out hope for that. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. And when I was 24, I had a suicide attempt. It was a rough year, but what I figured out when I met one of my heroes, the person sitting next to me, Nick Amy of NAMI, is that there is not a cure, there's recovery, okay? So I learned to live with my illness. Now I know one day I'm not gonna be better, I'm not gonna find a magic pill and not be anxious all the time or depressed. I'm living in recovery. And it did take a lot to happen. I went through a lot of trauma. I did have an attempt, but I'm now realizing that I found recovery, and it's about staying in that lane of recovery. And recovery for me is also coming here and speaking to you guys and saying, yes, I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and knowing that I may be judged, but you know what, I don't care, because maybe somebody out here needs to hear that. And maybe they can tell their friend, hey, I'm thinking of suicide. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I was introduced to Nick, I'm not even sure when. I was talking today in a discussion about suicide, about having a hero, or having someone that you can go to without judgments, that they're not gonna shame you or judge you, And that person besides my mother was Nick. Nick's someone I can go to, and I know if I ask him to help me, if I clean my house, he's not gonna walk in and walk out. I can go to him, and I think it's important that all of us find someone that is their hero. And Nick for that is me, and it's not only about that, it's, you know, just giving back and talking about it and coming to things like this and answering questions. Afterwards, if you have questions, please ask me. Because when I talk about what happened to me and my family, it reduces stigma for me because I still struggle with stigma. But I found recovery, and now I'm able to work with someone who helped me. We work together. It's really kind of crazy, and I am very proud, I guess. And I want to introduce my best friend, Nick Amy, who also has lived experience. And he's Nami Man, he's a superhero, and he's my hero, and I'm going to pass it off to him.
Thank you to the technology people for making these miracle microphones just work without me having to do anything too. So my name's Nick Amy. You're my hero too. I had things that I was going to say, and then that happened. I didn't know that was going to happen. Wow. I have the honor of being the Associate Executive Director of that organization outside NAMI. And I also have the honor of serving as the President of the Mental Health and Developmental Programs Board for Bucks County. As someone living with a mental illness, I live with schizoaffective disorder, ADHD, and OCD, and I'm a 3-time suicide attempt survivor and a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. You would not think, or at least I didn't think when I was growing up, I love you, thank you for that. I can't get over that. I didn't think I'd be here at all, or asked to, you know, run an organization or be a president of the mental health programs for Bucks County, or sit on a panel like this, or help somebody like you. I thought I'd be dead, and I think, you know, the one thing, and that presentation, Jason, was awesome. Thank you for that. It sounds a lot like a NAMI presentation. And, you know, the one thing we didn't really talk about was self-stigma. And I grew up in a household where it wasn't okay to have emotions, really. It wasn't okay to talk about things. It wasn't okay to do less than perfect on tests. And I mean, I had this internalized perfectionism. And part of it, when it came time for me to, you know, need help for my mental health, I thought I could do it myself. And, you know, I'm not Bob Vila, so it wasn't a do-it-yourself job. And what I didn't really know was that there was help out there. And I really wanted to be perfect, and I wanted to do all the right things. And when I started to struggle with my mental health, the first time I thought about suicide was in 2nd grade. And I didn't have the words to express it. I just knew that there was something different about me, or wrong with me. And the first time I ended up talking about suicide wasn't until I had a breakdown in college, and I went to the wellness center, and my dad drove up to Boston to get me from college and brought me home to Levittown. And, you know, I told them, I said, you know, it's not just physical, it's mental, and I don't want to be here anymore. And my mom screamed and cried and put her head in her hands and took me to the family doctor. And the family doctor prescribed me medications that were addictive. And I threw away the antidepressant, and I went back to school with the benzodiazepine. And that started a really healthy addiction for me. And the thing that they say in school is say no to drugs. But what they don't tell you is that drugs and alcohol, when you have a need for belonging and purpose and have been bullied your whole life, are very effective at being a social lubricant. and making you feel like you fit in temporarily. And that's what happened to me. Now, my Uncle Larry lived with schizophrenia and the disease of addiction, and he died from it. I did not. I overdosed once, I tried to kill myself 2 other times, and finally, because of some of the agencies out there, I got the help I needed. And the only thing that got me through school were the trusted adults, the teachers that are here. You have amazing school social workers here, and I think, one more time, and Joe is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my life. He's amazing. And Dawn is amazing too, and Alicia back there is amazing as well. But if it weren't for them, I would have died younger. I really would have. And so tonight we're going to talk about, you know, the ways that we can work on this together. But I'll let you know, NAMI has programs that Jason talked about. You go to treatment, and then you need a lifelong support system afterwards. Yeah, I'll get into this later maybe, but NAMI is that for you. And all of our services and programs are free, including our youth programs that go to schools and provide support and everything. But today I get to dress up as a mental health superhero also, and I get to visit people in hospitals, mainly kids, and let them know that if you go inpatient for your mental health and need treatment, you're not a bad kid for that. It's not a failure. And I'm not just talking to them, I'm talking to my younger self. So I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, for the whole district staff, the board, and everything. It's amazing that you're doing this. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nick. That gets me every time. I'm Dawn Hoops, and I'm one of the school social workers here at Pennridge, and we are a trio. And Alicia Landgraf is in the back, if you want to give a wave, Alicia. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew, and obviously Joe. I have the privilege of introducing Keely Rosenthal. She works for the Bucks County Behavioral Health as a mental health delegate and oversees the crisis services in Bucks. She's also a member of the Suicide Prevention Task Force, and she coordinates their suicide prevention education. And she's also a mom here in the Pennridge School District of 2 children. So without further ado, Keely.
Thank you. So I usually do a lot of public speaking, but my public speaking is usually about suicide prevention. I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight that I haven't ever done before. So, and most of us actually up here do lots of speaking in regards to mental health and suicide prevention as well. So tonight I put on a little bit different of a hat because I feel like some people need to hear a little bit of my story. So in 2022, my daughter was the victim of a pretty serious crime. It was in the summer, and she was going into her 3rd grade year. And 3rd grade was really, really tough. And then the summer came, we took a little break from school, much needed break from school. And then 4th grade year was really, really tough. Probably tougher than 3rd grade. And then that led to this summer. And about 3 weeks before school started, I was in the car with my 10-year-old and my 7-year-old. And my 10-year-old, great car conversations, by the way. A car is a really awesome venue to have car conversations. You get a really captive audience. My kids know what I do for a living. And we talk about mental health a lot. My 10-year-old had disclosed to me that she was thinking about killing herself during her 4th grade year, which was really, really tough socially and emotionally. And I sat in the car and held the steering wheel as I was driving, thinking about how could this happen to me? How could this happen to our family where mom, right, is a suicide prevention education specialist for Bucks County? and I supervise the crisis services for Bucks County. How is this happening to me right now? So I kind of gathered myself. And I've heard really hard stuff in the past, and this one really, really hit me. I remember thinking, stay calm, Keely. Your daughter needs you right now. And at first, I thanked her for telling me how she had been feeling. Without so many words, I said, gosh, that must have been so hard for you. And what did you do about it? So she would tell me how she was having a hard time sleeping. I did not know she was having a hard time sleeping. My other daughter, who was also the victim of the same crime, had a hard time sleeping as well, so she would be in my bed all the time because of nightmares. So she said, Mommy, I didn't want to bother you because, talking about her sister, I knew you were up with her at night. And I would lay there and just think that I wanted to die. I asked her if she had a plan, if she ever thought about how she would take her own life, and she did not. And then the conversation quickly shifted to something else that was very benign. So I got what I got, and I contacted her therapist, and then at that moment I could have my own freak out session where my daughter wasn't able to see me, and I said, oh my gosh, what do I do, what do I do? Because at that moment, when you have your parent hat on and you take off your suicide prevention hat, you don't know what to think. So I decided to use this time and this space that I had with other fellow parents here to talk about talking to your child about mental health. Just like physical health, your mental health can be good, fair, and poor. I say it all the time. I go into schools and I do presentations. I talk to kids, I talk to teachers. I've done suicide prevention education for the high school staff here in this building. Talk to your kids. Have open conversations. I've had many open conversations. Do you know who my daughter told when she was thinking about ending her life? She told her buddy in 4th grade, another student. That student sat with that information, didn't end up telling any trusted adult, and she said that that student had helped her through that really hard time. So think about that. These are 9 and 10-year-old kids who are going through really, really hard stuff. If we open up that conversation, if we ask our kids about suicide, now listen to me, if we ask our kids about suicide, we are not putting the idea of suicide in their minds. They are either thinking about it or they're not. These kids know, right? And they know when something's not right. They have an inkling. And most of the time, they're going to tell their fellow peers, right? But each of them need to, and this has been my recent soapbox, to find your trusted adult. Who's your trusted adult? I just did a training at a high school last week, and I challenged the kids. Now, when I asked them and I said, raise your hand for everybody that has a trusted adult in your mind, that if ever you needed anything, who's your trusted adult you'd go to? You don't have to tell me, just raise your hand. I'm gonna tell you that in a room of probably 50 kids, there was maybe 10 kids that raised their hand. Let's talk to our kids about finding that trusted adult. I don't care if it's not their parent. Maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a school teacher, maybe it's the school nurse. Whoever that trusted adult is, find the trusted adult. They're the helper, right? Because we talk about trusted people in our lives. So we know that kids, when they're experiencing suicidal thoughts, we know that they'll go tell their friends sometimes. We know that they go tell their trusted adult not often. We know that they sit with that pain often, right? It's usually not talked about. If we open up the conversation and we open up the space, I always say that there's 2 things in life that's the great equalizer, right? It's your space and your time. So if we give our space and our time to our most trusted people in our lives, which are our little friends, our children, our students, and we have those real conversations to talk about mental health. Where is your mental health? Good, fair, poor? What about suicidal ideation? What about killing yourself? Do you ever have thoughts that you're better off dead than alive? These are some of the thoughts that our kids are struggling with in silence. For a suicidal individual, it feels like they're in a dark hole and they can't get themselves out of their current situation. So why don't we open up and have those really tough, those really hard conversations with our kids so that we say the words, we ask the questions, so they don't have to come to us and tell us. Because if we open up those hard conversations, you might get a head nod. You might get a tear that runs down their face, and then we know there's pain there. Pain that we didn't know was there before until we decided to have that conversation. So if there's one thing that you take, at least from me tonight, it's that create space and time. Create the conversation so these little people do not have to find a way to tell you, right? Thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Nick. And thank you, Keely. We'd like to open it up to the audience now if you have any questions for the panelists. I hope it's on. Is it on? All right.
I'd just like to know what advice you'd give to someone. Well, I mean, I have a family member who does really need help. He's really struggling with his mental health, but he just refuses to admit it. Suggestions on how I should talk to him about it, or anything would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Has he ever been around someone like us who is a peer, who has gone through it and talked about it?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. That, you know, I mean, I'm getting old now, so maybe so I'm a little younger, but we have programs at NAMI with everything that we do at NAMI is peer-led. So part of what we do is we come into schools and we have support groups at Penn Foundation, St. Luke's Penn Foundation, just down the street in Sellersville, where he can interact with people who are just, you know, going through the same things that he is or have gone through the same things that he does. I kind of wish that he was here tonight, you know? I know, it's difficult. That's part of the problem. If it were that easy, he'd be here with you. So, so people like myself and Ryan, and I'm sure Jason, I have speeches that I've given on YouTube, and you know, you can just Google us, and we come up. There are, not just us either, there are people who have given TED Talks about living with mental health conditions and stuff like that. It is really easy seeing in the media how the media and movies and TV and everything, it's getting better, but how the media treats mental health. You know, we're scary people, we hurt people, but no, we don't. We live normal lives, you know. I'm a director at an organization, you know, we do things with our lives. So if there's any possibility that we can get him around or viewing people that live with mental health conditions and have struggled and gotten through it, you know, that he can see that it's not this monstrous thing. When I was little and I was struggling with this, I felt like a monster. And I felt like I was literally the only person on the planet ever to go through this stuff. And to know that you're not, you know, we say at NAMI and all of us say you're not alone. But what does that mean? What does it mean? It's a nice thing to say, but in practice, it means, you know, we have lived experience, we've been through it, and, you know, there's something on the other side of treatment. Also, kind of, you know, compassionately discussing what is treatment? Like, what happens when you go to therapy? You know, what happens if you go to a treatment program? And the fear of not knowing what happens Or will I get in trouble? Will people look at me differently? You know, that's that stigma too, to get rid of that. So peers help with that, and you know, little gentle conversations, like Keely was saying, really do have an impact. I don't know if anybody else.
I'm going to chime in real quick too. So I think, as well as like being creative, right? And that piggybacks off of that, but like being creative, obviously you know this individual, right? Like you know them. So one of the things that Nick pointed out was like some groups and NAMI, and I think NAMI is a great way to introduce us at any point, but introduction is great. I try to do that all the time with individuals. Hey, check out NAMI, it's free. You know, here's support groups. You know, they have all different topics. You can log in. You can log in and say you're someone else, you know, whatever. Like if it's an online thing, like just if that makes you feel comfortable, right? Like then do it. Do what makes you comfortable as long as it gets you to the table, right? But also like, you know, family support, right, is very important. And like whether that's through whatever, family support and family education, right? So that goes the same for substance use. So mental health, mental illness, substance use. Sometimes when the individuals that we love are struggling, like the best that we can do is to educate ourselves and to get the support for ourselves. And sometimes that can even then translate that model over to our loved one, right? Where they see us getting educated, getting informed, getting connected, getting support, right? And sometimes that can be contagious, right? The more we're informed and the more we're educated. So I would say anyone, I'm looking at you right now, you know, get support, get more education. There's resources out there for family. And also like, I'm just gonna give a plug here to NAMI. So NAMI has their NAMI Stride in Bucks County this Sunday, by the way. And you can get information about that out there, but that's a great creative way to say, hey, let's go to this walk, and there's like gonna be all this fun stuff and pizza. And, you know, right? And then it's like, you know, it's kind of that, like, you're not tricking the person, but like you're taking them somewhere where there's like other things going on, but like mental health care is happening there, right? Like it's undeniable. So like, I think that's kind of the point that I just wanted to hone in on, being creative, thinking outside the box, those types of things.
You're a good mom. You are.
Oh, I'm not a mom, but thank you, yes.
Sister friend, whatever. Yes,
Thank you.
You will be.
If you want to be.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been here for 70 years, living here, graduated Pennridge. We had no social workers when I got out many years ago, but it's great to see we have 3. We could use 6. My point tonight, though, is just this was one of the most powerful and emotional panel discussions I've ever heard in this room. You know, sometimes the resources are important, but your testimonies, every one of you, Nick and Katie, Ryan, Keely, it was very powerful. Thank you for sharing your heart and sharing your story and that vulnerability. The only comment I have and a question to follow up with a comment, the statistics are very helpful about national statistics. And I've always been a strong advocate for local. We have a lot of county statistics with our PACE survey. But can you speak a little bit to how important it is to share what's happening right here in Percy, Somersville, Dublin, Pennridge with our own students and how we get that information? And you know, that the last time we did PACE here, people were surprised that 4% of our 6th graders had attempted suicide, 10% of our seniors. So can you, and thank you again, Keely, for your comment about that the questions do not plant the seed. The seeds are there, the culture that we live in, the media, we know this germinates. So, but thank you so much for your reminder that the question does not plant a seed, but can you speak to the value of these local surveys that kids need to know what's happening here in Pennridge? Thank you.
So I include the PACE data in some of my suicide presentations that we do. It's QPR, so it's question, persuade, refer. Sounds really simple, right? We question the person if they're suicidal. When we notice something is off, we persuade them to get help, and we can refer them to that help. So the PACE data says, and now I can't specifically talk about Pennridge, but when we take a look at the PACE data in Bucks County, we know that about 13% of our young folks have seriously thought about suicide, and that translates down to a little bit less than half of our folks, of the 13% that have gone on to a suicide attempt and has survived that suicide attempt. So basically what I take from that data is that if we have a young person thinking of it, then let's assume that we need to keep them the safest that we can keep them possible, because there is a very high likelihood that they will go on to attempt a suicide once they have made that plan. And I hope, and I can't speak for Pennridge, but and maybe Pennridge wants to take that, but if they're using the PACE data in any other way, I don't know how they would do that.
I just want to say, Lee, it's great to see you. You look like you're 40 years old, man. Seriously.
I don't believe help.
But you know, I want to speak for myself. You know, I do engage with the Pennridge School District, like I said, around substance use prevention and recovery education. It's a two-pronged approach. I can't talk about prevention without talking about recovery, because I shared a little bit of my journey, right? Like, recovery led me to prevention, right? But what I do every year is I update my content in my presentations, and I tailor it a little bit in every different school district to some of the data. Right now, if there's not the data, then I go off of old data or state data. And I'm not like showing graphs and stuff, right? But like, I know what the needs are, right? And that kind of fuels the content that is being educated to these young people in a very creative way. And I'll share that, like, one of the things that I do is in Pennridge and the different school districts that I work in around substance use prevention is they all get a keychain that has a QR code on it around substance use prevention. And so all the content that's being delivered to them at any point in time, they can access a packet, a virtual packet that we put together, a digital packet that has really awesome evidence-based information in it around substances and around prevention and around stigma and around harm reduction and around recovery too, right? Because again, not necessarily, it might be for them. You know, recovery might be for them at that point in time, I don't know. But also recovery might be for their parent or their sibling at home or a friend, right? So we're all each other's keeper too. And we all need these resources. Even young people need these resources in their hands to be familiar with it. And the cool thing about this digital packet is we can update it as the trends change on the back end. So it's relevant forever, essentially, every year. And my contact information is in there as well. And I make that very clear too, like, hey, if you ever need to reach out at any point in time to someone, you now know me, right? I share my lived experience and my story through storytelling with these young people and say, I hope that you feel comfortable reaching out to me if you ever need to, for yourself, for a friend, for a family member, that trusted adult, right? Like that, I'm trying to offer that and say, like, please, like, we're here for you. We care about you and your friends and your family, right? Reach out. There's no wrong door. Reach out. And and I don't know if that helps, but I just want to share that I do take that data into consideration when I am providing my content. I learned that from you, Lee, so, you know. Give Lee a round of applause.
Also, Lee, I want to point out, and keeping it local is really important. The culture and the climate of the district is really important. And I want you to know that the superintendent has been here the whole time, sitting up in the front. Our director of pupil services is here, and they engaged us. They came to us. Dawn and Joe came to us and asked us to do this. So your leadership is really important. Your school board, your superintendent, your staff in the schools are really important, and you have control over that. So, you know, if there are things going on in a school that you are not happy with, and there are things that are not being provided as far as mental health education, support, things like that, let them know. This administration here wants to know about it, and this is a sign of progress. We're heading in the right direction.
with statistics. As a social worker, I had to take no less than 5 statistics classes throughout college. So I hate running statistics, but I love talking about statistics because they show a lot. But when you come to looking at statistics locally, there's 2 problems that you run into, and both of them are a resources issue. Statistics take a very long time to gather. It takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of man hours, and it takes a lot of money. And that's the big thing, the money. People don't want to pay for statistics because they're afraid of what they're going to find sometimes. So be an advocate for your community and say we need to find funds to run statistics on the things that are important to us. Mental health is important. We're talking about students in a school district as young as 3 years old, they're not even in school yet, that are having possibly thoughts, they're having mental illness crises, they're having these things that they can't even explain. So we need to run the statistics to find that. One of the statistics that when I do therapy, I tell this to my parents all the time, and it's a scary statistic. 96% of Americans, 96% have thought about ending their life, either by suicide or just saying, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. Things are so terrible right now that I would rather not be alive or just not wake up. 96% of Americans have had thoughts like that. That's a very sobering statistic. But that's a great statistic that I talk to my parents about, because when I talk to them, when I do assessments, I talk about suicide. Do you have suicidal thoughts? Well, no, I don't want to kill myself. Would it be better if you just didn't wake up tomorrow? Oh yeah, I've had that thought. Or I sometimes wish I was just never born. How many times have you heard that come from somebody's mouth? I just wish I was never born. Those are statistics that we need to look at, but we need the resources to be able to gather all of those statistics.
Hi, I usually don't need a microphone, I'm so loud. So I have actually 2 questions. The first one is, I think Keely, you kind of addressed this the most. I'm the mom of a 4th grader, and I know that's very young, but I am concerned with certain things. Are there resources or ideas for parents on how to approach the topic? Because of course the thought has run through my head that I don't want to put thoughts in his head that aren't already there. I don't know when I was that age if I actually understood the concept of how to take my own life. But like you guys were saying, like with social media and with the way that things are today, I don't know if that is something that has crossed his mind, and it's something that I would want to talk to him about, be open about. We try to be a very open household, but sometimes we're not quite sure how to be.
Yeah, thanks for your question. 4th grade's really hard, right? Especially for these young minds, because we know that, part of their brain isn't even fully formed yet. I think that being honest, real, and say the hard words for them. Again, I think that we all need to hear it, that you can't put the idea of suicide into somebody's mind. It's either they're thinking about it or they're not. Nobody says, ooh, that's an idea, I haven't thought of that yet. That's not the case with suicide and suicide prevention. So I think having as many opportunities to have these real conversations with your child will be very beneficial. I think also normalizing some of the thoughts and the feelings. So normalizing having real conversations, and don't just have one. Keep having those conversations until they say, Mom, you're annoying, and they roll their eyes at you. That's how you know you're doing a good job.
Sorry, I'm just going to piggyback off of hers. So if the answer is yes, or you think the answer is yes, where does a parent go from there? Because I obviously didn't know that all of your organizations exist, and it is very hard to find a therapist that will take a new patient child.
So I'm going to start out with just saying that when your child comes to you and you have these conversations and you hear something really surprising or shocking or scary, always thank them, right? So they just shared something really deep, dark inside of them, And thanking them really kind of reduces some of that anxiety. So thank you for telling me. Wow, that's got to be really, really hard. How have you been dealing with that lately? So kind of keep inside of the conversation. Let them know that it's okay not to be okay, and that mom's going to do everything that she can to get you to some help that you need. And how can I best help you right now? So sit with it, sit with the uncomfortable, and just be, because that empathetic presence that we're able to provide, that person who just told us something really scary, is very invaluable. Right? So we always want to rush to the resources. We always want to rush to the solution. Sometimes there's no solution. And sometimes, at least right away, the person who just told you that they were suicidal doesn't want to all of a sudden think of a plan to get them out of their current predicament or situation. They just want to sit with their ugly feelings, and they just want to not be alone anymore with it. So if you provide that space and time so that they're not sitting alone with those ugly feelings, and for the first time, they're able to have somebody in that deep, dark place with them, that is so invaluable. So sit with it for just a little bit, and then we can talk about resources.
Yeah. And one of the scariest things when I was little, and I didn't even have the words for suicide, was I was scared to lose control. Like, I didn't know what treatment was. I didn't know what would happen to me if I talked about that. So, you know, when you're having that conversation, you know, what do you think would help? What do you think you need? You know, things like that. Like, how can we partner together? And I know they're young, but one of the scariest things as a human is to lose control over your life. And so letting them know, I'm not gonna do anything to hurt you. You know, if you get to that resource stage and you call, say, NAMI or the hub, both of us can help you to navigate the system and find a therapist, find a counselor, find a psychiatrist, or find a treatment center, whatever you need. So we're like the first point to call. And then from there you go. But letting your child know, I know that it sounds wild to give your kid control of some things, but you're not. Sometimes it's the illusion of control, but it's just so that you have them with you as a partner the whole way. Partnering is one of the best ways, and if you want good outcomes for long-term recovery, having the individual who needs the treatment, being a partner in it, and letting them feel like they have control over some of it is really crucial. So letting them know that. And then if you don't know what to do, like, call us too. And you know, even if we can't immediately help you, we're there for support for you too. It's important that you get that support too, like Ryan said earlier. But, you know, give us some control. Like, I'm talking to little Nick. I want some control over what happens to me too. And, you know, that way you might avoid a huge crisis. And they're more expensive. They're more expensive for everybody. You know, the least restrictive care that we can provide and avoiding crises, like a suicide attempt, or like for me, an overdose. That stuff is really expensive, and if you have insurance, it's still expensive. So to avoid that, and it's also the long-term traumatic, you know, feelings about that. I'll never forget my hospitalizations. I'll never forget my suicide attempts. So if you can avoid that to begin with, that's what we're going for. It may not be immediate, but like Keely said, you know, we're there for you.
And I just want to say too, I mean, even in my story that I shared, like, you know, I had gotten help many times, right? But it just never seemed to work, right? And it was because people were saying when, what, how, where to me, right? Like, and it wasn't self-directed. It wasn't until I finally met with the right team of people that put me in the driver's seat, and they're like, yo, we're going on this ride with you, right? Like, we're here with you on this journey. You make the decisions of what road you want to turn down, right? With the resources that were available. So I totally agree with that. And I just want to say too, like, this sounds really simple and like kind of, I don't know, but you know, thinking about mental health and substance use recovery or getting help for substance use, treating it like physical health, right? Like if you have a broken arm, you go to the ER and you get your arm looked at, you know, and if you need a cast, you get a cast, and like people sign it, and like it's cool, you know, like, and so we need to like continue to treat mental health and substance use recovery just like that. We need to be cheerleaders for people in their journey and like and encourage them and relate it in that type of way, you know, like if you get injured, if you like I said, break your arm, or if you struggle with like diabetes or cancer for that matter, you know, like you go get help from certain professionals, and we're here to support and care for you and cheerlead you along your journey, rallying around you in a positive way. And that's how we need to treat this kind of stuff, right? And I just want to say too, real quick on this topic, there's these models out there of respite, right? Peer-run respite, and there are people with lived experience that run these programs where it's not meant to be a long-term, it's not crisis, it's actually crisis diversion, right? Where people can go and spend a couple days just to get away and feel connected and get support. And there is a local respite that opened recently, and it's free of charge, and you can be from anywhere, any county, it doesn't matter, out of state, and they will take you or take an individual that is like, you know, they need to get away, they need to get out of the situation for a couple days temporarily just to get respite and get understanding and get connected to resources so that it doesn't turn into a crisis. So I just wanted to put that out there. There's that type of service out there as well.
And Ryan, where is that?
So that's actually in Pottstown. So it's in Montgomery County in Pottstown. It's called the Ferns. And again, they do not, you can be from anywhere. You can be from any county. It's fully funded, it's free, it doesn't go through insurance, and it's beautiful. I visited there a couple weeks ago. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And just really quick, I'm so sorry, Andrea, I see. Don't forget 988. Mom, if it's the middle of the night and you're having a hard time with your child, 988 is the new suicide prevention hotline number, but also a crisis hotline. And then they'll be able to get you connected in a pinch if you can't, because right, we can't think very clear when we're in a crisis state. So if you just remember 988 in a pinch.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the panelists for being so, generous and open with your time and experience. And I did just want to read between the lines a little bit for the woman over there who asked, I'm not here, I'm not planted to do a shameless plug, but I feel like she might have been asking about how to start a conversation, and the best conversations always happen in the kitchen. You can either, I'm here representing Abby's Bakery. We created a nonprofit in honor of my niece who we lost to suicide. She loved baking, that was her therapy. What we've done is we have these mason jars with dry ingredients for all of her favorite recipes. And again, you don't have to come to our table, you don't have to buy our jars, we're not here for that. You can go to our website and look at the recipes, but here's what it gives you the opportunity to do. It will give you a forum, it will give you an opportunity when you are baking to open up these conversations, because once you put the brownie in the oven, once you put the banana bread in the oven, you can read Abby's story and use that as a prompt to ask these really difficult forward questions about suicide and mental health that are much better talked about than saying, let's have a family meeting at 7 o'clock in the living room. So I just want to encourage you to do activities, Keely mentioned the car ride, baking, cooking, maybe you prefer to make lasagna, maybe that's your time. But talking about, coming to this event, that's another great opportunity. Talk about coming to this event and what you learned and what you heard, and use that as a stimulus to ask pointed questions about how your kids, loved ones are feeling. Thank you.
Thank you.
While we're getting the mic down here, I see a hand. I challenge all the parents in the room to have a conversation with your child that sounds something like this. Make a promise to them. I promise to sit with you in hard times. I promise not to judge you. And I promise to share your pain and hold your pain just for a little bit, right? Until we figure out what we're gonna do. Holding your pain for your child is something that is so invaluable. I recently told my 10-year-old this, and she didn't really respond by saying anything profound. It was just a tear that rolled down her cheek, and I just wanted to share that with you guys tonight, and that's a little challenge for you to take home and put in your pocket.
Can you say it again?
So the challenge is to talk with your child and let them know that you will hold their pain for them. You will share their pain. You will sit with them with any hard time, without any judgment. And you will always be there for them. And that's a promise, that's a good promise that you can make.
I would have loved to have heard that when I was in 2nd grade.
I just wanted to echo what everyone else said too about thanking you for sharing your stories. For a little while there, I was like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to make a comment, I can't recover. Like, I was having a hard time recovering. I wanted to bring up the topic that was mentioned once, I'm sorry, I forget who said it, of ADHD. And the reason I bring that up is because it is so prevalent, so much so that I feel like it's glossed over sometimes, or used as an excuse sometimes, and I don't think that it's talked about enough in terms of how that affects long-term mental health. And I'd really like to know your experiences with ADHD and its effects on long-term health from your perspective. Again, it's so prevalent that I think it's important to talk about.
I live with it. Does anybody else have it? It can be a superpower. ADHD is kind of a superpower. But it also, I mean, Mia and Debbie are back there, and they're my colleagues at NAMI. If I could take a pill and get rid of it, I would. I really would. It makes me feel like tonight when I leave here, I will lay in my bed and review every single word that came out of my mouth, critique it, judge it, convince myself that I'm a terrible person. I mean, I know what it's like to have ADHD. Not treating it when I was young, and a lot of people, you know, it's the stigma that you know, oh, you're so ADHD because you can't, you know, keep your mind on one topic, or, you know, things like that, when it's not necessarily a clinical diagnosis, is really harmful, really, really harmful. And I do think that, you know, we have to stop using that language. You know, you're so ADHD, you're so bipolar, things like that. Stop that. Because when it comes time to get treatment for it, you know, it's just something, oh, everybody has ADD, or everybody has ADHD. Not everybody has any of it, you know, including ADHD. And so, you know, getting rid of that is a great place to start. But, you know, growing up with it kind of is, it goes along with other mental health conditions too, and suicidality, and it makes it worse. And so, you know, as a professional in the field, I still struggle with all of that. I am clean and sober, so, you know, for me, taking medication for ADHD was not something that I was thrilled about. But education, that there are other forms of medication that don't have stimulants in them, and, you know, that there are other ways to manage mental health conditions other than just medication, is another great way to, you know, eliminate the, you know, the ways that we talk about it and everything like that. Being an adult now, and running an organization with it, it's got its perks and its minuses as well. But you know, I just wish that my parents had identified it and treated it. And instead of putting me in gifted programs and saying that I was just high-strung, really doing something about it at an earlier age, and that would have, you know, helped me as an adult now, but just not ignoring it. And, you know, if you're concerned that your child has it, to really pursue it.
My child definitely has it. We have a diagnosis.
Definitely has a diagnosis,
Definitely has a diagnosis. He's almost 12. He was diagnosed at 7. I'm a big supporter of both therapy and medication, and how impactful that can be. I think I still just worry about his long-term mental health. He also has autism level 1, and I will say that the ADHD affects him so much more than that particular diagnosis, or ADHD, I guess is the fun term. But it's interesting as a parent to see ADHD be so impactful on their behavior, their self-esteem, their ability to just move throughout their day. So he is on both medication and therapy. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the long-term ramifications of all of that, because it is still a concern even with all of those things in place.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, make it into a superpower too.
We're a product of all the long-term effects, so he's got a good outcome.
Yeah.
And a good mom.
Absolutely.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I'm blown away. Like, this has been incredible. My question is more, I'm on the older end. So I have one in college, one in high school. The car rides are over, I miss them terribly. And I feel like I have this toolkit of things I used to help them. And I understand that, like, all mental health, not all mental health, but when someone's having an issue, you want to treat it the same way you would, like, if you broke your arm. But also as a mom, I'm like, well, not everything's an ER visit, too. You know, like, there is, like, this space here where we can walk through it. And when I'm at an event like this, as a parent, I hear the stories and the acute cases, and in a way, I'm like almost terrified. Like, I feel like all I have is just hope that this doesn't happen to my child. And I know there's more tools at my disposal around that. So my question's twofold, and goes along with what some other parents had said around, like, what are ways to make this an easier conversation? My kids know all my tricks at this point. They come in the door with, like, Mom, and I don't want to take a walk, and I don't want to put my phone down for 30 minutes. Like, I have my things, but more tools help parents with just the day-to-day anxiety that is part of life, sadness that is part of life. Like, when you're going through a hard time, you will feel bad, and that's okay. And then also, just on a broader level, how do we implement that in a district? Like, how do we make the more casual conversations around mental health? And, you know, obviously when something traumatic happens, everyone's doing their best to make sure all the children are taken care of, but to take away the stigma and the things you at all talked about, where if you normalize discussing how you're feeling, and you're not going to be, you know, sent to a therapist every time, like there's this middle ground here. How can we do that even across a school?
I think Ernest might have an idea first.
I'll put Ernest on it. I'm on the school board, by the way, that's why I'm asking the question.
While Ernest thinks about it, I just don't silver lining everything. Not everything needs a silver lining. Like, we all have bad days, and normalizing that. And I think that part of what I struggled with growing up was my mom was, like, perfect. And I thought she was just perfect, and that everything was perfect and that I had to be. And every time I had a bad day, she made it better, and, you know, but not everything has a silver lining. Because when I got to an age that I started to struggle, middle and high school, really badly, I was looking for a silver lining for everything, and there isn't always, you know? So it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel like crap sometimes. It's okay to not do perfectly on schoolwork and tests and everything. It's okay to be who you are, and it's not something that you have to go through alone. I feel sad sometimes too, and it's okay. I get through it. This is how I did. And you be the model for that parents-wise, but then I'm going to let her speak to it as a district.
My name is Chloe Kircher, and I am the president of the Avidum Club here at the high school. We started this initiative a few years ago. It's really focused on peers helping peers, which I know you guys mentioned a little bit, because I know a lot of us go to each other with little problems and big problems too. So I just want everyone to be aware of that in the room tonight, that Pennridge High School is taking steps towards making sure that people are able to have a forum to express their mental health concerns about themselves, people in their families.
Chloe, can you go to the table at the resource table? But Chloe, do you want to talk about when you guys meet if parents want to jot that down?
Yes, yeah, we're actually starting our meetings in October, so tell your students to listen to the announcements and the daily ramble. We have lots of fun events, as well as like a white elephant during the holiday times, just a place to get students connected. So tell them to listen to the announcements and follow our Instagram.
Thank you.
It's Avidum is the club.
Thank you for everything that you do. Really, thank you.
I want to thank Chloe. Chloe actually had one of the social workers, Joe Warner, approach me and say, is it okay if students are represented in the resource organizations? And so I talked to Mr. Barrios, and he was actually excited about the prospect of having a student. I never met Chloe until actually right now, so thank you, Chloe. This was an amazing night. And I think from the powerful stories we heard from the panel members to the keynote speaker, Jason Fry, who's actually been here before, I think virtually, put on a presentation for the school district. I think it's remarkable. The questions that were asked, the engagement from the audience, the soft registration. Hopefully some people are here that did not register, which is a good sign. From what I understand, when the district put on something similar, not to this scale necessarily, there were roughly 10 people in the audience. And I think if you look around, there are a lot. I think I counted a little over 100 people here tonight. Mr. Barrios and I do want to recognize the board members that are here. We have several board members. If you could stand if you're a board member. Oh, stand up, don't be shy. And I need to say, and someone already said this, I can't remember if it was Lee or one of the panelists, without this board, this event does not occur.
Yeah.
Without the current superintendent, this event does not occur. The stigma associated with mental health is real, and you heard these stories tonight. The challenges our students, your children face on a daily basis, regardless of how we grew up and we walked 20 miles to school and in the snow and so on and so forth, these kids are facing significant challenges, and because of kids like Chloe, there is a platform within the school to address that. I also want to recognize, and Mr. Barrios whispered to me a few minutes ago, the teachers. So teachers, counselors, professional staff, if you can stand up. We have a significant number of staff who are committed to supporting students wherever they are in their life journey. This was one event. However, we need to continue to move forward in this space of addressing mental health challenges for children and adolescents within the school. We heard as early as 3 years old from one of the panelists that suicide was a consideration, and the conversation about suicide didn't occur, the first one, until he was in college. So from about 3 to 18, 19, no one put that in his mind. That was something that was in him, and it doesn't matter the reason. I'm gonna repeat that. The reason is irrelevant. It's the fact that someone went through a period of time, an extended period of time in their life without any adult or any person addressing a need. And again, we have wonderful staff here that are committed to supporting your children every day, regardless of what the situation is. Someone mentioned, all you need is a trusted adult. And as you can see from the staff who stood up, we have a lot of people who would serve as a trusted adult. I'm going to close there. However, I want you to continue to walk around. I want to be respectful of the different resource organizations here tonight. If you could continue to walk around, talk to those folks, come up to the panelists, they're available. But I want to thank you as parents, guardians, and community members on behalf of the superintendent, the school board, and myself for being here tonight and supporting this program, which I think is meaningful beyond what we anticipated. So thank you, and have a good night.